So good day, friends. This is Dr. Bob Hamilton, and you have tuned in today to the Hamilton Review, where kids and culture collide. Every week when I come to you on Tuesdays and throughout the week, I say the very, very same thing, which is thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you, thank you, thank you, because I know that all of you are leading busy lives, and the fact that you tune into this podcast means a lot to me. I hope that, and I know it is good because not me, but all the people I bring on this podcast are phenomenal people. They're accomplished. They're doing things. And so I want these shows to be relevant to you and to give you information and to actually inspire you. And I will tell you, and by the way, if you like what you hear on a weekly basis, share it with your friends, share it with your family, because I want lots of people to hear the people that I bring on this show. And today is today is really no exception. Today is a very, very special day. I have a superstar coming on the show. His name is John McKinney. So John McKinney, welcome to the Hamilton Review.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so honored that you're here. And I'm going to read John has written a book, and we're going to talk about this book. Is entitled Hike with Kids. We will make that, you're going to see a copy of this book on my Facebook and my Instagram, but it is written, Hike with Kids is the name of the book. The subtitle is Leave No Child Inside. I love that subtitle. But let me just real quickly share with you all who John McKinney is, because he is an outstanding individual. He is an award-winning writer, public speaker, and author of 30 hiking-themed books, inspiring narratives, top-selling guides, books for children. John is particularly passionate about sharing the stories of California trails, and he is the only one to have visited and written about all 280 California state parks. I had no idea, John, there were 280 California state parks. He tells the story of his epic hike along the entire California coast in the critically acclaimed Hiking on the Edge, Dreams, Schemes, and 1,600 miles on the California Coastal Trail. For 18 years, he wrote a weekly hiking column for the LA Times, has hiked and enthusiastically told the story of more than 10,000 miles of trails across America and around the world. His Every Trail Tells a Story series of guide highlights of the very best hikes in California. He's an Eagle Scout and has written more than 1,000 stories, opinion pieces after hiking parklands and our relationship with nature. John's books for kids in turn include Let's Go Hiking and Let's Go I can't pronounce that word. Joking?
Geocaching.
Okay.
Geocaching, yes.
We're going to talk about that because I'm not sure what that word means. And has long focused on inspiring a diversity of young people to hit the trail. And that's what we're doing today. So, John McKinney, you have done a lot. I stand at your feet and want to hear your wisdom here. So I'm going to turn the microphone over to you and let you maybe tell a little bit about your background, your story, how this all began, and what was that passion that caused you to be such an avid hiker?
Well, my long, strange journey to becoming a hiking expert and sort of making a living telling people to take a hike began in the suburbs of Los Angeles, Whittier and Downey, California, which is quite removed from anything green. But I did have the good fortune to join an active Boy Scout troop, Troop 441. And we took to the woods on a regular basis. And I just lived for those moments. And I loved earning all the merit badges, particularly camping and hiking and all of the outdoors ones. Accounting, not so much. I think I needed about 3 attempts to pass the accounting merit badge, which accounts for my very poor business skills. But I took some really great hikes when when I was 12, 13 years old with the Scouts locally in the San Bernardino Mountains and the Santa Monica Mountains. And we hiked what was called the Silver Moccasin Trail, an epic trek of 50 miles across the San Gabriel Mountains to the top of Mount Baden-Powell. And Baden-Powell is this sort of the founder and patron saint of the Boy Scouts. And we stood upon that peak, 9,800 feet high, and it had to have been the top of the world, right? Uh, yeah. So I then went on to study broadcast journalism at University of Southern California. And I must say that my academic studies were of some help to me in my career, but probably the best part of college life was starting the USC hiking club, the Trojans, and the Trojans, of course, have this motto, fight on. And that's where my motto came from, hike on. And, the academics were kind of got in the way of my hiking, but they were of some value.
And your parents were okay with this? Were they they were footing the bill for SC?
Well, they tried their best to ease me into a more traditional career. And uh, one one day when I was 14 years old, I said, John, it's so wonderful that you like all of this hiking stuff, but you know, um, it's not an adult thing to do, and we think that you're going to um, go into the business world, and we want to help you out. And so they wheel in a set of golf clubs, and I'm expecting a new backpack, right? uh, so I think I disappointed them.
So, well, listen, John. I mean, I do think that if you walk the course, if you're not, running around in a little golf cart, you do cover a fair amount of ground. I mean, what is a typical, 18 holes of walking? How many miles is that?
Yeah, it's green exercise of a sort. And, I encourage all my golfing friends to keep at it, but don't get in the cart and drink margaritas. Walk that course.
That's right. And you know what? I have to say, I am a very, very mediocre golfer, but I actually love to play golf for the reason of just exactly what you said, just being out in the beauty of a golf course and walking it. And I try my best to walk. Sometimes I'm playing with people who are trying to get through the course quickly and they demand that you jump into a cart, right? And
Yeah.
some courses don't let you walk. You know that. They make you drive. They make you drive. So because they want to hurry up the golfers so that they can get more people on the course in the day. But anyway, so you saw the golf clubs and what did you do?
I very politely took the 4 or 5 lessons that my parents paid for and then put them in the closet and hit the trail, I guess.
You picked up your backpack and kept hiking. So,
Yeah.
one of the things I find to be fascinating is you have really hiked a lot. You've hiked all around the U.S. You've hiked internationally. Where have you hiked internationally, by the way?
A lot in the UK, particularly um, the Cotswolds and Cornwall coast and coast to coast across England and Exmoor and Dartmoor. I love hiking in England and Scotland. Um, and then I also like hiking in the Mediterranean, most particularly Greece. My mother is Greek American, and I share culture and a little bit of the language. And Greece is a country of mountains, and
Sure.
so I
Yeah.
love to roam the mountains.
So where have you hiked in Greece? What trails have you been on?
Well, last year I hiked Mount Olympus,
Wow.
uh,
Okay.
where the so-called gods hang out. And I didn't see Zeus, but I did make it to the top, and I,
What is the elevation of Mount Olympus?
it's just under 10,000 feet,
Okay.
and it's not remarkable for its height. What's remarkable is it just like almost comes out of the ocean. It's not very far from the sea, and it has its own microclimate that's quite volatile. And when I got to the top of the mountain, there was thunder and lightning, and it began to snow on the last day of summer, and it was all the more awesome for that.
So maybe
But
maybe
most of my work is promoting California
yeah.
and trips in California.
So that has
And
been, I mean, you have traveled, I mean, the fact that you've been to 280 parks in California, in my mind, is amazing. That astounds me. I didn't realize that there were that many parks. I really didn't. Um, so just kind of segueing a little bit to the book that you wrote. And the book again is entitled Hike with Kids. And you can get it on Amazon, by the way. But John, first of all, tell us why you wrote this book, Hike with Kids.
I really enjoyed parenthood. I was kind of a hands-on dad, and I took my kids on hikes. And as I looked around, I realized that I didn't think enough parents were hitting the trail with their children. And um, that might have been for lack of advice, lack of motivation, or whatever. Hiking per se is the most popular form of outdoor recreation in America. We love to take a hike, but we have resistances. And REI, who wants to sell us a lot of hiking gear, has broken down the resistances to four ways, and we don't know where to go.
Yeah,
No, we
yeah.
just we just are clueless about which trail to take and what park to visit. Uh, we don't know how to go, which is we don't have the outdoor skills, and they haven't been passed on along from parent to child as well as we have. And then we don't have anybody to go with. It seems like our friends are always busy, or we'd never have time to take our kids out. And then we're just, unfortunately, in this modern age, too stressed out to get out of the house, get off the couch, and get into the woods. So I wanted to share the wonderful experience I had with hiking with my kids through all of the ages. And more recently, I've become a grandparent and like to take my 4-year-old grandson on the trail. And so I'm like repeating the cycle now. And it's it's a wonderful experience for both children and parents and grandparents alike. And that's why I wrote Hike with Kids, to share that experience.
Yeah. Well, your book really it is very clear to me when as I read this book how delighted you are, especially with kids. And I think that, listen, children, they love to be outside. My little motto in my practice is your kids should live outside as much as possible. Having them in your apartment or your house or whatever, watching TV or he's playing video games, God forbid, is probably the worst thing you could do with them. So getting them out and definitely hiking with them is such a very, very, very good thing.
Well,
What kind
bless you for that. Do you write out prescriptions for nature?
You know what? I have. I don't do it with every patient, but I've actually done exactly that. I've said, I've written on my little prescription form, go on a hike or do, I occasionally do that. That is not something that I do routinely. You may convince me to start doing that. Because after I read your book, like I say, I'm gonna buy this book for all of my children, and I'm gonna strongly recommend this book for my patients because I think you're giving me great ideas. So, John, just kind of getting into some of the details of what you put here, I want to get into them because you mentioned, like for example, getting prepared. What are the things that you need to really prepare yourself with when you're going to go on a hike? I mean, I'm talking about not like a hike, for, a 20-minute hike, but I'm talking about a longer, more substantial hike. What kind of things that you should you prepare for, especially when you're thinking about children?
I would start out by thinking this out and by picking a hike that kids like. And there's some clues here about what they like. And that's a hike that's challenging enough that they feel like they've been outdoors and conquered something, accomplished something. Um, One secret is just add water. Uh, there's something about a creek or a lakeside adventure or even along the shore of the ocean that kids love. And pick a hike that uh, is close to your home at first. So there isn't this ridiculously long drive to the trailhead where they're confined and they get restless and so on. And then I would say think about gearing up. I'm,
And
I'm not,
when you say gearing up, what are the things that you're talking about?
I like to see kids get into it by having their own hiking boots. I know kids grow quickly, they grow out of shoes, it can get kind of expensive. But there's something about putting on a special pair of hiking shoes that gets them into it.
Yeah.
And I would also say about the only other two things that they absolutely love is their own little day pack. And you don't need to put anything more in their day pack at a young age than a water bottle. They should have their own water bottle and uh, a change of socks maybe and something warm or rainproof. But that you can carry everything else, but they
Yeah.
should get into it by having their own hiking shoes and their own little pack.
Yeah. My kids would also want to have like a granola bar too. They like to have that close at hand, so they like to feel like they're not too far from a granola bar.
Yeah, and that's another fun thing to do too when you're not hiking is get them to make their own trail mix.
Yeah.
All the fun little pieces of fruit and nuts, and don't let them make it with all M&Ms though.
That's I happen to have a very soft spot in my heart for M&Ms, but you're right. That is not exactly what you want your kids to only have on the trail. What do you put in your gorp, by the way?
Oh, I'm a minimalist. I love just nuts, raisins, and either carob chips or M&Ms. Um,
And that's about it. So you,
well, I can kind of carried away too with the dried fruit, cranberries and bits of apricot.
yeah,
And
good health. I mean, stuff that'll give you a little bit of energy, a little bit of sugar there, but nothing too much. You mentioned also wool socks, the value of wool socks, the correct socks. You don't want them to be cotton, right? You want them wool.
well, we kind of got away from wool, and you're going to have a hard time finding a lot of wool socks, but we have some fabulous synthetics
Right.
breed that wick away moisture, that prevent blisters. And so, if you're going to spring for a pair of hiking shoes or boots for the kids, or for yourself for that matter, don't be cheap and get cotton socks to go with it. Get yourself some hiking socks.
Yeah. Well, that's good advice. You also talk about getting prepared for cold or hot. And obviously, when you start out in the morning, it's a little chillier, right? And then as the day goes on, so you talk about this idea of layering up. And I think this is something to share. What do you mean when you talk about layering up?
Well, ideally, you dress in layers, beginning with a synthetic t-shirt, and then perhaps a long sleeve uh, shirt like the kind you're wearing, and then a lightweight fleece, and then if it's getting really colder, a outerwear that's some kind of a shell that's windproof and waterproof. A word of warning about hiking with kids and layering: you'd think they'd tell you when they're too hot or too cold, but you really have to pay attention to them because they don't always do that.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you see them uh, burning up or shivering, and you got to take action. And if you have all of the layering clothing with you, it's easy to switch it out.
Yeah, I think that, it's like skiing. When you go skiing, you put lots of layers on, and that does keep you, obviously sometimes you have to shed a layer or two, and that's why you have the backpack. You put them into your backpack, right? And
Right.
so, yeah, and as the day wears on, definitely as the sun comes out, you can get pretty warm out there. And we all, I think those of us who've been on the trail know what we're talking about. You talk about the classic 10 essentials in what you should have in your backpack or just what you should take with you. Do you want to go through these, or do you want me to kind of? I'll read them, and you can kind of comment on them. First of all, the map. Obviously, I think that's pretty obvious.
It's a nice skill to start teaching your kids to use a map. It's kind of a artifact now from another era with the smartphones and the navigation with a phone, but it's a good skill to have. And if only they can learn to stay oriented to north, most park trails are pretty self-explanatory. It just helps. It helps that way.
Yeah, you mentioned going with a compass and maybe a GPS unit. The interesting thing is GPS sometimes is not available in certain parts as you go into, right? When you go into the country, you don't get it. So a compass is another one. Water, you're not into energy drinks. I noticed that you say water, not necessarily Gatorade or other things.
Yeah, somehow we've gone through thousands of years of human civilization drinking just water for our walks in the woods. And um, if you want a Gatorade, go for it, but I don't think you need it.
It's true. Gatorade does have sugar. It has electrolytes in it, but I don't think it is a requisite either. You talk about extra food. You say bring more food than you think you're going to need.
Yeah, kids and adults, for that matter, burn up the calories in the great outdoors, and so don't stint on lunch and don't stint on the extra energy bars or trail mix.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing, if you're hungry, it's not fun to be on the trail. I mean, most people I mean, we certainly, when we go hiking, we put lots of stuff in the backpack. You talk about extra clothes. Extra clothes are critical, obviously, if you get cold, or if you do happen to, I suppose, get wet, you can change it out.
Yeah, and if you've layered up, you probably have the extra clothes with you. I mean,
Right, as you go along. But obviously, you can fall into, I've done this before. I've fallen into creeks. And when you do, you're wet and you're soggy and you're miserable. So sometimes just having an extra pair of something to put on is kind of nice, right?
yeah. Well, everyone knows their own kid and how delicate or indelicate they are in the outdoors.
That's true. By the way, what am I just thinking about hiking? One of my the time I did fall into the creek was actually on the Hallelujah Trail in Kauai. Have you done that trail?
Oh, well, that's a good one with all of those waterfalls and stream crossings.
It's amazing.
Who hasn't hiked that trail and not fallen
Yeah. Okay, well, just as an aside, friends. Okay, the Hallelujah Trail is on the. You've got to go a little bit north of Hanalei Bay on Kauai. By the way, just FYI, the Nepali Coast is the name of it, and the Nepali Coast I think has got more rainfall in that one place than any place in the entire world. It's like got like hundreds of inches of rain. And so that trail, maybe you'll have some sun. And we did have a beautiful sunny day, but the trail was wet. And I remember very, very well, I had, my boots and everything. Every step that I took, I was sliding. I was like, it was mud. And by the way, when you're going out, there's a cliff that goes down to the ocean, which is hundreds of feet down. It's a little terrifying, I have to say. I was a little bit anxious. My son didn't seem to be as anxious as I was, but that was one of the most memorable times when we did that. It was such a fun outing, and it took 2 or 3 days to get. It took one day to get out there. It wasn't that many miles, but my gosh, I was beat when we finally got there.
Did you have children along with on that hike?
Yes, I did. I had my son. Now he was a young teen at that time, and he was 11, 12, something like that. He was a trooper. I mean, he went the whole way. He did it. He had no, I don't remember him complaining, but he was fine, and it was really, really a wonderful time. Yes, I did. It's great. It was a great. You like that trail?
Yeah, very much.
It's a beautiful trail. So, friends, if you're out there listening, you want to do a great adventure, Kalalua Trail in Kauai. Okay, you mentioned we're going through back to our classic 10 essentials for your hiking. A first aid kit. I think that's pretty self-explanatory, right? I mean,
Right.
you
Uh,
you get blisters, you get scratches, and so and if you're bleeding, you need a Band-Aid to put over that, which makes perfect sense.
that's pretty much an adult thing to carry. Um, and if you want to spice it up with some colorful band-aids for the kids, great.
Yeah. I mean, you do fall. I mean, things happen. By the way, John, just as an aside, have you ever really been injured on the trail?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
Very fortunate.
Well, God has been good to you. That's because you've been
Truly,
10,000 miles on the trail. That's amazing. Have you ever been bitten by a snake?
no,
Have you ever seen rattlesnakes?
many.
Have you ever seen wildlife? Like bears and other wild, dangerous creatures?
Yes. Recently, a bear along the trail when I was hiking in the California Gold Country, and I've seen a dozen mountain lions over the years. Um, one of them, I was hiking in Big Sur along a San Vicente Creek,
Huh.
and I saw a mountain lion on the other side of the creek. And I kept walking up one side of the creek, and the mountain lion kept walking on the other side of the creek. And it got to be sunset, and I set up my tent 5 or 6 miles in from the coast in a backpacker camp. I put up my tent, make a little fire, and the sun goes down. It gets darker and darker and darker. And the last thing I see before it gets pitch black are these two amber eyes from the mountain lion staring back at me. So nothing happened. But it was kind of an uneasy night there at the campground.
Yeah, no, indeed. I'm not sure what to do. You didn't throw a rock at the guy, or you didn't try to throw a piece of wood at him. Nothing.
No.
You just kind of let him stalk you. And that's. Have you ever felt great fear on a trail?
Mm, I think I've sort of got immune to a lot of fears.
Yeah.
Uh, and I, the thing I struggle with most as a hiker is actually not danger so much as for someone like me who hikes a lot, it takes me a long time to de-stress when I start a hike. I just takes takes longer than I think it should for me to shed all of the city stuff and worry.
Yeah.
Uh,
And kind of get into the hike.
Still working on that.
Do you listen to music when you're hiking? Do you ever put on headphones or earbuds?
I do not.
Okay.
Uh, I usually listen to the classical musical station on my drives to the trail. To, but no,
You're
no.
not, you don't do that. Okay.
And I on walks, as opposed to hikes, for exercise, I sometimes listen to podcasts. Um,
Okay. You have a podcast to listen to now, your own podcast here.
yeah. So I'll be tuning into this to.
Sure. Absolutely. So, because I do see people out there on the trail sometimes, and they're just into their music. They're kind of bebopping along, and I don't like. I do that. I have done that before, but also I also think that there's something about the essence of you lose a little bit of the experience. Do you feel that way too?
Well, I think that hiking amplifies your connections, uh, and it brings you closer to friends and family. It certainly brings you closer to nature, the natural world. And if you're a believer, I think it brings you closer to spirit, to uh, a, a higher power.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think all of that happens better without being plugged in to a music or audio source.
Yeah, I also think there is a value in hearing what's going on around you too. I mean, you hear birds, you hear things. You could potentially hear things in the bush, but a rattlesnake making their little noise. They're
Mm-hmm.
rattling away there, and that's probably a good thing to have your mind attendant to, right? So I think if you do not, if you're, I mean, listen, I love music, and I really, I totally love it, but I do think that when you're out there on the trail, there's something about just being in the moment too.
Yeah. it's hearing the wildlife around you, the hum of the bees, the different bird songs. Um, I'm a terrible birder, but I love to try to identify them anyway, and by their song or by their profile. And even the most subtle sounds of your boots crunching over acorns, or the drip, drip, drip of the moss on the trees on a foggy morning. All of that
Yeah,
sense input makes for a better hike.
I think so too. And I think about the wind in the trees, just the beauty of that, hearing the wind just blowing in trees. I guess I grew up in Northern California, and that was a, a memory from my youth of hearing when I was in the woods. You hear the wind blowing. You have to look out for falling branches, by the way. But it does. It's so wonderful to actually hear that sound. Just this is a whisper. Okay, going back to your top 10, a pocket knife. Pocket knives are good. You say keep them sharp. That's a very good thing. For your kids, they don't nothing wrong with a kid carrying a pocket knife, right? I think they're great for kids are a little bit older, maybe not 2 year olds, but 8, 9, 10 year olds for sure. Some
Well,
protection.
you have to be a little careful with the knives and children. Um, at my son's school, I had a little hiking club for the kids, for the sixth graders.
Yeah.
And I took them on little adventures on Friday afternoons. We got them off an hour early from school, and I took them to the local mountains. And I outfitted them all with their day packs. And I went through the 10 essentials, and they all dutifully loaded up their packs with the flashlight and the trail mix and the extra clothes and the pocket knife. And so they're often their backpacks were also their school backpacks. So I got called into the principal's office, and she said, "You let children pack knives and bring them to school?" It's just pocket knives. Let me show you the manual here. They're they're classified as weapons. You're letting them bring weapons onto campus.
Oh my gosh. You know what?
So
The world is going crazy. There was a time when people in the old country, I'm talking about a while ago, they would actually bring their rifles. I knew kids who would go out after school hunting, and they would bring their rifles to school so they could go hunting after school. And so they would bring their rifles. Anyway,
I think worse than having a pocket knife in the backpack is bringing their homework on a hike.
Oh boy. Yeah, no
You know,
kidding.
get that.
I'm sure when you tell the principal that, they loved it. They loved hearing that, right? So, okay, pocket knife, but don't bring them to school, friends. You leave them at home. You got to keep things in the right order here. Sun protection, that's a good thing. Sunglasses and sunscreens are really, really important. High SPF for kids up to about 30. Flashlights and headlights, you don't really need them during the day, right? But they're kind of fun to have.
Yeah, kids love headlamps.
Yeah.
Uh,
And matches and other fire starters.
yeah, let's forget the matches.
Again, you can't. I don't think you can bring matches to school either. They're afraid you're going to light the school on fire. But anyway, so other than bringing them to school, but it's good to have them in the backpack. God forbid something would happen. So listen, I want to call you Dr. McKinney, but you're just John McKinney. You should have a doctorate in what you do, but John McKinney, one of your last chapter, which I love. By the way, I want to ask you one before we get into the last chapter, but I'm curious: is there one trail that you loved more than any other trail? I know that's impossible, maybe or maybe a handful of trails that are particularly memorable that you really, really loved.
Well, I would say my favorite adult trail is in an area that we've been talking about in far northern Mendocino County and Humboldt County called the Lost Coast. And it's a 25-mile section of coast that's truly lost because this fist of mountains comes up from the sea and it shoves Highway 1 inland 25 miles. And between the highway and the shore is this amazing place to hike, crossed by what's called the Lost Coast Trail. And there's redwood groves and these mysterious Roosevelt elk, like creatures out of a Tolkien novel wandering around, and miles and miles of black sand beaches. And you're only 2 miles from the ocean, but it's so precipitous, you're just looking down several thousand feet. And it's hard to imagine when we go to Santa Monica Beach or other popular beaches that there could exist a coast like that in California.
Very
As,
cool. Yeah.
as kid favorites around Southern California, there's lots of them. I, I've I found Malibu Creek State Park to be a hit every time I've taken children there. Just get them to the creek and they start splashing. And Malibu Gorge, they love it. And so that's a particular favorite of mine. In the San Gabriel Mountains, wandering to Switzer Falls and some of the foothill trails. Again, anything along a creek is fabulous. We're kind of lucky in Southern California because we're not far from all of these different landscapes, the mountains and even high mountains, 10,000-foot mountains in the San Gabriels and San Bernardinos, and the desert and the forest and the beach. And um, so you can really mix it up when you take the kids out, but you're not limited to one environment.
No, that's so true, especially in Southern California. It's amazing the variety. The Lost Coast, your comments about the Lost Coast, you're talking about where I grew up. I grew up in Humboldt County, and so I have not done that trail. And you're wow. I should probably get back up there and do that trail. It sounds like an amazing 25 miles. You camped along the way, I presume. Did you do it all in one day?
Oh no, it's a 60-mile trail.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So it's kind of hard to do one.
It's in two uh, parks, Sinkyone Wilderness, the state park, and then the Bureau of Land Management has something called the King Range National Conservation Area, and they're contiguous. And
Yeah, you keep walking.
so,
Have you ever done the Santiago de Compostela in Spain?
no, that isn't a pilgrimage I've made. I've made a couple other pilgrimages.
Where have those pilgrimages taken you?
Well, my main pilgrimage and uh, just about the only time I've ventured from the secular to the spiritual, I went to Mount Athos, Greece, which is a monastic kingdom um, where the monks lived much as their Christian brothers did 1,000 years ago.
Wow.
They walked from monastery to monastery and hung out with the monks. And to make a really long story short, a miracle adoption occurred out of that trip. And I wrote a book called Hiking the Holy Mountain,
Wow.
Tales of Monks and Miracles on the Trails of Mount Athos, Greece. So when I hear about the Camino or other pilgrimages, I really like to encourage people to hike for that reason.
Yeah. No,
As
my wife and I did. My wife and I a couple of years ago now, we hiked the Santiago de Compostela. We actually started in France and went over the Pyrenees. And I will tell you, it was one of the most. We didn't do the entire Camino. It was like 400 miles. We did 80 miles, and I got to
Mhm.
tell you, it was one of the most wonderful times of our life. It was beautiful, and it's the trail is very very well marked. This yeah, obviously, some of it is through urban landscape, so you go through roads and places like that. But the majority of it is walking out in the country. You're just walking along creek beds and other locations, other spots. It was pretty amazing. Okay, the last chapter of your book, which I loved, is entitled "What Parents, What Adults Can Learn from Kids About Hiking." I love this chapter. Can you take it from there?
uh, One of the things we can learn is to slow down. And it's especially important that we walk at a child's pace sometimes and see the world from their eyes, because we're leaving behind a hyper fast, just way too fast paced urban life. And children, I think, more take to a slower pace, you and you can't rush them along. They if they'll spend a half an hour watching a banana slug move across the trail and be fascinated, or
Yes.
tadpoles in the creek, or any kind of an animal. And on a on another way is if you watch children move through the wilderness, move through it, you'll notice how quickly they adapt, and they slow down. And their powers of observation, because they're a lot lower to the ground, they see things that adults don't. Many a time I've been on the trail, and I've missed that bird on a low branch. I've missed the bugs. Um, I've not noticed the plants change from one flora to another, like like they do. And their sensory input with colors and light and sound is something we can all learn from.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. No, I think that you're right. Children, they're perceptive, incredibly perceptive, and they'll see things that you don't see. And I think that either they'll hear sounds you don't hear, or you're not. You know what? Sometimes it's just not. We're not tuning into that, and they tune into things which are great. So this is a great. This is a great. He finishes his book with what adults can learn from kids about hiking, and I think that that's another good reason to take kids on a hike with you. Okay, well, John McKinney, I'm watching our time. We are closing down here, but I want to say thank you. Thank you, first of all, for writing this book, Hike with Kids. Leave No Child Inside is his subtitle. And thank you for taking the time to be on the Hamilton Review today.
thank you for having me. And everybody, get out there with their kids and give them nature, give them nurture, hike smart, and have fun.
Have fun. That's right. And by the way, this book, I would encourage. If you read the book, you're gonna get inspired to go on a hike. I promise you. I have been highly inspired. Okay. Well, John McKinney, thank you, and friends, thank you for coming on and listening to this wonderful podcast with John McKinney. His book, Hike with Kids. I recommend that you pick it up. And thank you for tuning into the Hamilton Review, where kids and culture collide. Until next time, be well. Bye-bye.
You have been listening to the Hamilton Review, where kids and culture collide. Thank you for allowing us to be a part of your day. Tune in again next week on Apple Podcast. Rate and comment and tell a friend.